Rain tapped against the window of a small, dimly lit room where Ethan Miller, a 24-year-old college student, sat staring at a stack of unpaid bills. His textbooks lay open, but his mind wasn't on his studies, it was on survival. Tuition was overdue, his part-time job barely paid for food, and the dream of becoming an architect was slipping further away every day. Life had taught Ethan one cruel lesson: the world doesn't wait for you to catch up. That's when fate knocked on his door, not gently, but with a twist so bizarre that even he wouldn't have believed it if he weren't living it. It started when Ethan's friend, Jake, convinced him to attend a charity gala at a local luxury hotel. Jake was a waiter there and told Ethan, "Dude, rich people tip like they're sprinkling gold dust. You might meet someone who could change your luck." Ethan didn't believe in miracles, but he went anyway. He borrowed a decent suit from Jake, polished his worn-out shoes, and hoped no one would notice the nervous way he adjusted his tie. The ballroom was filled with the scent of roses and money. Laughter floated through the air like champagne bubbles. Ethan felt completely out of place until he saw her. She stood by the window, elegant and calm, her silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a midnight blue gown that shimmered softly under the chandelier. Margaret Langford, 71 years old, billionaire widow, and one of the most respected philanthropists in the city. Everyone admired her from afar, but few approached. Ethan didn't plan to either, until fate quite literally tripped him out. A waiter brushed past, spilling red wine near her shoes. Ethan instinctively stepped forward, grabbing a napkin and helping clean the mess before it reached her gown. Margaret looked down at him, startled at first, then, intrigued. "Thank you, young man," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "Most people just stare." Ethan smiled awkwardly. "Guess I'm not most people." She chuckled softly. "No, I suppose you're not." That brief exchange would change everything. Over the next week, Margaret kept thinking about him. She was surrounded by people who only saw her money: business partners, advisors, even distant relatives who came knocking whenever they needed something. But Ethan hadn't asked for anything. He just helped. A few days later, she sent a message through the charity organization, asking if Ethan could assist her with a student mentorship program she was launching. He agreed, grateful for the small job. But the more time they spent together, the more their conversations deepened. From books and architecture to loneliness and loss, she admired his humility. He admired her strength, and then, out of nowhere, came her proposal. "Ethan," she said one evening, her tone steady but unreadable, "I need someone I can trust. Someone who won't betray me. My family, they've already taken too much. I want to marry someone sincere, not for love, but for partnership. In return, I'll make sure you never struggle again." Ethan was speechless. Marry her? The idea sounded insane. She was old enough to be his grandmother. But when he looked into her eyes, he didn't see manipulation, he saw pain, and a strange sense of peace. He asked her, "Why me?" Margaret smiled faintly. "Because you didn't look at me the way others do. You didn't see a fortune, you saw a person." Ethan agreed, though unsure what awaited him. The marriage was private, no media, no glamour. Just a legal ceremony, 2 signatures, and a quiet dinner afterward. For Ethan, it felt surreal. For Margaret, it was the first time in years she felt safe. But 7 days later, everything changed. It began with a phone call from Margaret's lawyer. "Mr. Miller," the voice said gravely, "there's something you should see." Confused, Ethan drove to her estate, an enormous mansion with marble floors and walls lined with paintings worth more than he could earn in 10 lifetimes. But when he arrived, the staff was silent, their faces pale. Margaret had collapsed in her study that morning. By the time Ethan reached her, she was sitting in a wheelchair, weak but awake. She smiled faintly as he entered. "Don't look so worried," she whispered. "I'm old, not immortal." He knelt beside her. "You should be in the hospital." She shook her head. "No. There's something I need you to find first. Go to my study. The second drawer on the left." Inside was a sealed envelope with his name on it. He opened it slowly, his hands trembling. Inside was a will and a letter. The letter read, "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I have trusted you completely. Everything I own, every company, property, and account is now under your control. But before you accept it, you must know the truth. My family never cared for me. They tried to take everything after my husband died. I married you not to test your loyalty, but to protect what matters most: integrity. I chose you because you reminded me of him, honest, kind, and unafraid of what people think. Use this wealth to do what I couldn't: build a world that values kindness over greed." Margaret. Ethan froze. His mind couldn't process it. Overnight, the poor student had become the heir to a billion-dollar empire, but what shocked him most wasn't the money, it was what came next. At the funeral 2 weeks later, Margaret's family showed up like vultures. Her son, Richard Langford, approached Ethan furiously. "You think this is yours?" he sneered. "You manipulated her." Ethan stood silent as lawyers presented the will, confirming everything. Gasps filled the room. Reporters called him the gold digger who struck gold. But Ethan didn't care. He didn't touch a penny. Instead, he used the first of her funds to establish the Langford Foundation for underprivileged students, a scholarship in her name. The mansion became a learning center for architecture and design students. The media tried to paint him as a fraud, but when people saw where the money went, public opinion changed. One evening, while standing in the garden Margaret loved, Ethan whispered, "You were right. Kindness is the only real wealth." A gentle wind brushed through the trees, and he smiled faintly, feeling, somehow, that she was still watching. Years passed. Ethan became a respected philanthropist and architect, known not just for his designs, but for his heart. Every year on the anniversary of Margaret's passing, he would visit her grave and bring a white rose, the same kind she used to keep by her window. "Thank you," he'd whisper, "for seeing something in me when no one else did." The world never stopped talking about the strange marriage between a poor student and a 71-year-old millionaire. Some called it scandal, others called it fate. But Ethan knew the truth. It was a story about trust, humanity, and how love doesn't always look the way we expect.